Now it's my pleasure to welcome Representative Judy Chu, who represents the 32nd Congressional District of California and has been a member of Congress since 2009. Among her many achievements and responsibilities, Representative Chu serves on the House Judiciary Committee, where she's a member of several subcommittees, including the Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security. In January of this year, Representative Chu, along with several other members of Congress, wrote to the TSA expressing concerns over the racial profiling of Sikh, Muslim, South Asian, and Arab communities in airport security screenings. We are honored to have her here with us today.
Good morning. I want to thank Hansdeep Singh of the United Sikhs for organizing this panel as we come upon the 10th anniversary of 9/11. An open and honest discussion about how our airport security policies are affecting American travelers could not be more important. It is very critical to have greater security in the aftermath of 9/11. But I also feel that it's very, very important to make sure that we are having screening policies that protect Americans, but that also are not racial profiling Americans. In fact, wasn't long after I was elected that I met the United Sikhs. They were one of the first groups that came to visit me in my new post as a member of the Judiciary Committee. And I remember sitting in my office and listening to men and women who traveled the world doing humanitarian work and fighting for justice. But there was a lot of pain there, and much of their pain had to do with the discrimination they faced every single time they flew home. They were pulled out of line in front of the other passengers. They were forced to submit to a pat down of their turbans, sometimes their turbans being just unfurled, and which is not necessarily the policy. They were pulled into rooms to be interrogated for hours about what they were doing and who they were with while they were abroad. They were put into glass cages. Their babies were being screened. When I heard about this, I was appalled, and I had to act. So when the Judiciary Committee held a hearing on racial profiling and racial profiling in law enforcement policies, I raised the issue of this treatment at our nation's airport. I submitted testimony and stories from the United Sikhs and their members for the record. And I led a letter with members of the Constitution Subcommittee to the TSA Administrator, John Pistole, saying that we wanted to have a meeting. And so we did, in fact, have a meeting with Mr. Pistole and members of Congress. As we sat down, we addressed certain issues. And the two key issues we faced were, first, what is the policy regarding bulky clothing and the turban? It seems to me that it has changed. Sikhs say that it used to be that there would only be a pat down of the turbans if Sikhs set off the metal detector, and then they would have to undergo the secondary screening. But now TSA seems to be implying that a turban in and of itself is bulky clothing, and therefore it would require a secondary screening of Sikhs every time. And therefore the policy, actually, in my belief, has not been made very, very clear. And in fact, there have been cases where Sikhs have been pulled out of line early for this extra step, even before they have gone through the metal screening. And yet, no Sikh has ever committed a terrorist attack in the United States. The second issue that we talked about was what happened to complaints filed by passengers when they seek a grievance for unfair treatment or harassment. Well, the TSA claimed that there were only 35 complaints and that they were addressed in a matter of 4 or 5 months. However, a coalition of community organizations sent Secretary Napolitano detailing some of their concerns with TSA's racial profiling practices, but 9 months later they hadn't received an answer. Also, I actually pulled out at that meeting the answers to the letters that TSA had given back, and just in the one that I read off, it was actually 6 months after the Sikh American had filed the complaint. Not only that, actually all it said was, you do not have enough documentation. In other words, it took 6 months for the answer to be, you do not have enough documentation. The thing is that the documentation would come from having some kind of video from the airport. But by that time, 6 months afterwards, all airports destroy the video equipment. And in fact, there is great variation in the airports in terms of how long they keep videos of these incidents. For some, it could be as little as 1 week. And in fact, there is no centralized database that determines how long those videotapes are kept. You cannot find out what the policy is at your airport with regard to how long they keep those tapes. So I made clear that I had a great desire for Mr. Pistole to address these discrimination complaints and concerns about mistreatment, and that there is consistency amongst TSA employees, that they knew and followed what the procedures were, and that, in fact, TSA policies are based on fact and not on race. I also asked for him to meet with Sikh advocacy groups and to hear their concerns face to face, and he did agree to do that. This would be the first time such a meeting would be taking place. I am committed to making sure that TSA's policies are carried out in an effective, neutral, and non-discriminatory manner. It is very, very important because these policies cause great grief amongst the Sikh community. They are forced to endure the indignity and dehumanizing impact of being singled out, placed in this glass cage, and searched with their children and the rest of the flying public watching. But what's worse is that this kind of mistreatment only reinforces common stereotypes of turbaned or bearded individuals being suspect. And the effect is felt very, very far from the airport security line. In the wake of 9/11, the Sikh community has seen a rise in hate crimes. And in fact, my heart broke when I read about the latest assaults. Earlier this year, 2 elderly Sikh men in Elk Grove in Northern California were doing what they've been doing for years, taking their afternoon walk. Surinder Singh, who was age 67, and Gurmesh Atwal, age 78, were right in the neighborhoods they've been living in for years when they were shot by a gun, both murdered in cold blood. They'd done nothing. They were murdered not for money, but just murdered for their turbans. And it is for Surinder and Gurmesh that we must fight discrimination anywhere and everywhere that we find it, whether it is in our communities, our schools, or in our nation's airports. So, as we near the 10-year anniversary of 9/11, let's take the opportunity to reflect on what kind of country we want and what can be done to make sure that this kind of treatment doesn't continue. I hope that you will join me in this effort, and that with people who are committed to speaking against injustices and racially motivated attacks, that we will have a country that will be truly inclusive of all people. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Representative Chu. Next, we'll have Nadira Al-Khalili. She's the legal counsel for CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. Nadira works in CARE's national headquarters, which are located on Capitol Hill here in D.C. Since beginning her employment with CARE, Nadira has worked both as an in-house counsel for the nonprofit organization and also as a civil rights advocate for CARE constituents.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to all of you all for attending this panel, and thanks to the organizers as well for hosting all of us and hosting this conference. It's a very important conference. As Dan mentioned, I work for the Council on American Islamic Relations, and so I wanted to start a little by telling you something about the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is also called CAIR, C-A-I-R. CAIR was started in 1994 as an advocacy organization to advance the rights and the civil liberties and to advance education regarding Muslims and people of the Islamic faith in the United States of America. And we would like to see American Muslims being able to practice their religion in any way that they would like without being subject to punishment from the government or enhanced screening or any other type of scrutiny that is going to try to dissuade them from practicing their religion. And while we're doing this, we also, of course, would like to see people of other faiths being able to practice their religion freely and without suspicion here in the United States. So, since we started in 1994, CAIR has received complaints about the way that Muslims are being treated at airports. Naturally, after September 11th, the complaints increased. A lot of Muslims who wear traditional Muslim clothing or who wear a religious headscarf had complained to CAIR after 9/11 that they were being subject to extra wanding by airport authorities, extra baggage screening, extra pat-downs, these type things. We've been receiving these complaints over the years. Now, these complaints have seemed to kind of explode since the rolling out of the AIT and since the implementation of the enhanced screening that is now being used in United States airports.